Like if you found the video valuable. The streets of Paris glistened with the reflection of golden streetlights on wet cobblestones. Rain had just passed, leaving the city with a quiet hush, as though the world itself held its breath. Amélie stood outside the Café Lumière, clutching her violin case to her chest. For years, she had played in the corner of the café, her music filling the air with notes that carried both joy and sorrow. Tonight was different. Tonight, she had decided it would be her last song in Paris before leaving for New York to pursue a new life. Inside, the café buzzed with the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses. But when Amélie stepped to her usual corner, a silence spread, the kind of reverent stillness reserved for old friends and cherished moments. She set down her case, pulled out her worn violin, and let her bow rest on the strings. Across the café, a man she had never seen before looked up from his notebook. He had dark hair falling messily over his forehead and eyes that held a kind of loneliness she recognized instantly. He wasn't drinking his coffee, he was simply waiting, as though he'd been searching for something intangible. The first notes of Amélie's melody drifted through the air, soft, aching, and tender. She played not for an audience but for herself, for the Paris she loved, and for the part of her heart she would leave behind. Yet as her bow moved, her gaze locked with the stranger's. He didn't look away. Instead, he closed his notebook and leaned forward, drawn in by her music as if it carried words only he could understand. When the final note lingered and fell silent, the café erupted in gentle applause. But Amélie noticed only the stranger standing, walking toward her with hesitant steps. That was, he began, his voice catching as though language wasn't enough. That was the most beautiful song I've ever heard. She smiled faintly, lowering her violin. It was my last one. I'm leaving Paris tomorrow. Something flickered in his expression, regret, urgency, longing. Then I was meant to hear it. I'm Julien. Amélie, she replied softly. They sat together as the night stretched on, Paris humming gently outside the café walls. He told her he was a writer, lost in stories he couldn't quite finish, searching for words he couldn't find. She told him about the streets where she practiced as a child, the bridges where her music echoed like whispers of old dreams. And for a few hours, the weight of departure faded. It was as though they had always known each other, two souls who had crossed paths too late, or perhaps just in time. When the café emptied, and the owner nodded for them to leave, Julien walked her through the lamplit streets. The Seine shimmered beside them, carrying the reflection of Notre Dame's towers. At the Pont Neuf, Amélie stopped. This is where I said goodbye to my father when he left for America. Now it's my turn. Julien swallowed hard. Do you have to go? Her heart ached, but she nodded. Some journeys can't be postponed. But maybe this is not the end. He hesitated, then pulled a folded page from his notebook. Take this. It's the beginning of a story I've never been able to finish. Maybe you'll find the ending. Amélie tucked it into her violin case. She wanted to tell him she'd remember his eyes, his voice, this night, but instead, she lifted her violin once more and played a soft melody, just for him. A song without an audience, meant only for the two of them under the Parisian sky. When the last note faded, Julien whispered, "Then I'll wait. However long it takes." The next morning, as the plane lifted off the ground, Amélie held the folded page in her hand. The words were unfinished, but she smiled through her tears. Because deep down, she knew the story, and the song, wasn't over. Not yet.